Have you ever thought, I want to retire and live like a king? I recently came across an interesting discussion where someone asked, where can I live like a king for $1 million for the rest of my life? People fantasize about this. They want to accumulate a pile of money and then leave it all behind and just go and live off of that money for the rest of their lives. This was a very interesting question for me because it goes to the heart of what we talk about here at Nomad Capitalist. Go where you're treated best. Where I am right now in Singapore with their $20 gin and tonics, I'm realizing this isn't a place that I would really want to live full time. I enjoy coming, but you're not going to retire here with $1 million in the bank. You're not going to retire to a lot of countries with $1 million in the bank, but I'm going to give you the tips that I've developed and some ideas of places you can go if you want to retire with $1 million. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. One of the things I talked about in the book Nomad Capitalist was how to live a location-independent lifestyle, how to go to a place where you can have a great quality of life, but spend a lot less money than you're spending where you live now. And so to the question of, I've got $1 million, I'm never going to work again, how do I live for the rest of my life? The first thing that I would consider is I would want to buy a home. I would want to peel off a part of that $1 million, go and buy a house that I could own, ideally in a country that had very low or no property taxes, that had very low or no association dues, or anything that was going to cause me ongoing stress. So I want to buy a house with a chunk of that million because property prices in a lot of places in the world are going through the roof. And a lot of the places that you might think you can retire to and live with your squirreled away $1 million for the rest of your life, your rent is going to go up dramatically. I see what happens in markets, for example, even like Cambodia, where you think, hey, I can go to Cambodia that Andrew talks about and live like a king. And to a certain extent you can, but the problem is that prices of some real estate in Cambodia over the last couple of years have tripled. And so rents are going to triple. It's going to keep going up. And the fact that Cambodia is on the US dollar is going to potentially be an issue. So I want to find a place where I can buy a house for a chunk of that $1 million. Let's say $100,000, $200,000. Now, there are places where $200,000 can get you a nice quasi-penthouse, not huge. Maybe you get the rooftop hot tub. Maybe that's the kind of thing that you set up. Is that living like a king to you? I don't know. We all have different definitions of living like a king. If you're looking for a gated mansion, $1 million probably ain't going to cut it in most places in the world. But the first thing I would do is I would peel off $100,000 to $200,000 and I would buy a house. Then I would look for a place, ideally, that didn't use the US dollar or the euro as their local currency, because countries that use main stable currencies tend to have higher prices. It's the difference between Serbia, where I spend time, Montenegro, where I spend summers. Montenegro has the euro. Things are not cheap. Meanwhile, in Serbia, it's one of the cheapest places that I have been. And so those are the things that I would consider. The other things that I would consider are, can I get a residence permit in the country that's longer term? Can I get a residence permit that potentially eventually leads to citizenship? Because if I go to a country that's cheap now, and 10 years from now I say, you know what, we don't want you to come here anymore, we don't want you here anymore, well, now you're going to be back out looking for the next place, and you may not be able to do that, and that's going to eat into your ability to live like a king on that $1 million. So to me, the idea here is precision. We need to have the housing dialed in. We need to minimize our ongoing costs there. We need to reduce our currency risk and be able to hold stable currency and then spend it in a less stable currency. And we want to be able to make sure that we can stay in that country. Ideally, if the country has high interest rates in the bank and you're living in that currency, let's say you want to move to the country of Georgia, where you can make 9.5% on your Georgian laris in the bank right now. If you're spending Georgian lari, the risk of holding Georgian lari and earning that 9.5% becomes less. And that brings me to kind of the critical piece of living like a king, is that you can just pull down on the $900,000 or $800,000 that is left. But obviously what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have some kind of safe, stable investment that is not going to go down in value, but that just gives you some income every year. So if you could have $800,000 and earn almost 10% interest, that's $80,000 in interest. And then you could figure out, okay, I'm going to spend the 80,000. How much of the remainder do I need to peel off of every year? Whether I have 10 years to live, 20 years to live, 50 years to live, who knows? But that's the other thing is, can I get higher interest rates in the bank? Because otherwise, you're going to come here to Singapore and you're going to put your money in the bank in US dollars at 2.5%, and you're not going to have nearly as much money to live. Now, as to where you can live like a king, there are two areas that speak to me. Asia, where I spend a lot of time, I do think will become more expensive as time goes on, and I see some issues there. I would look at, in one way, South America. Colombia is very interesting. There are parts of Colombia you could live, perhaps not in Bogota forever, but other parts of the country. Paraguay is very interesting. I imagine there are other places in South America that could work, but I think those are the two of the ones that stand out to me the most, that are affordable, and you could actually live a very nice lifestyle. What I think is probably a much more interesting part of the world for living like a king is in Eastern Europe. Now that could range from Hungary to Serbia to Georgia to Armenia. These are countries a lot of people don't know that much about in many cases, but you get a lot more of the king because you've often got super cheap wine. If you like to smoke or you like to smoke cigars, you've got cheap tobacco. You have just a lot of things are cheap. Cheap food, excellent food. And so for me, that part of the world is probably the easiest place to live if you're just trying to go all out and to splurge. What do you think? Comment below. What would be the country that you would want to go and live like a king? For me, I see Latin America and their exposure to the US and Canada, the growing economies, they're growing a bit slower, but all the elements there, I see that potentially it's going to be harder. Asia, I think, also potentially harder. Hungary, Budapest, very cheap place to live. Now, how does that work going forward, seeing that Budapest and Hungary in the EU? I can't entirely be sure. What is the fact that Serbia may eventually, in some distant future, join the EU due to prices? Who exactly knows? And obviously, in those situations, you have the risk that the country goes to the euro and prices go up substantially. So I would look at the Georgias. I would look at the Armenias. I would look at, I guess, the Albanias. I would look at Belgrade. I think it's a great place to go and live. And quite frankly, if you're looking to meet people, I think Belgrade, quite frankly, could be a fantastic place. You can get a residence permit. You can get decent interest in the banks. You're at the doorstep of Europe. You're living a European lifestyle, so you're not feeling like you're sacrificing. A lot of people come and say, I don't want to live in Africa. Yeah, no one wants to live in Africa that I talk to. And so even though I had a friend from Nigeria who said you could retire to parts of Nigeria with $250,000, I don't think anyone wants to do that. And so for me, if you're looking to have the long-term way of living like a king, where you're not going to get as homesick, where you're going to have all the things that you need, where you have property, where you have a social circle, where you have dating, where you have food, where you have wine, where you have all the trappings of living like a king or queen, to me, Eastern Europe is the place to go. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist. I wrote this book, which you can find on Amazon, to distill a lot of the stuff we talk about in these videos and a lot of the stuff I've learned over the last decade plus traveling all around the world, teaching you about how to legally reduce your taxes, build your personal freedom, and create wealth faster. Definitely get a copy of this book if you want to learn more. Now, if you want to watch more videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you click the notifications bell so you never miss one of our new videos with more tips on how to go where you're treated best. And if you're already a 6- or 7-figure entrepreneur and you'd like to put these strategies in place for yourself, go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn about how I can help you.